Drawing of Williem, done by Willem de Kooning in the late 1940s, demonstrates the artist's technical grace, his skills as a draftsman, and his understanding of proportion in illusionary space. Consequently, it's probably the most boring de Kooning piece you will ever encounter. It also demonstrates the deep affection and respect he had for his wife, depicting her in such a way in light of the ghoulish works he is most famous for. This, on the other hand, is more representative of de Kooning's approach to making an image. Proportions start to become exaggerated and unimportant. Familiar forms break down. The mark-making is wild and full of energy, completely unbound. It's clear at this point that de Kooning is having fun, experimenting wildly with the potentialities within both abstraction and representation. This is a study for the first piece of the Women series. This drawing demonstrates the premeditation that goes into making a de Kooning painting. This drawing went on to inform the approach de Kooning would take upon entering Women 1, and is important in the case of having a point of departure, a way of entering a painting that will inevitably shift and reorient itself in a way that is completely unrecognizable from the original study. Woman 1, the first and arguably most important of the Women series. It's as terrifying and violent as it is hilarious. The figure's right arm is flayed open. Skin, tissue, and bone disintegrate into the flatness of the surrounding shape. Red paint is splotched under the confrontational, oversized eyeballs, suggesting a violent encounter, blood splattering. The figure's teeth gnash at you. They would clearly bite you given the opportunity. Her legs lack any shred of humanity. Instead, they are disjointed and bent back, coming not to feet but cloven hooves. This lady is a beast. While not as overtly funny as some of his other work, in the context of the relationship to a classical figurative tradition, Woman 1 is pretty hilarious. It's essentially an open mockery of the Cartesian ideal of feminine beauty. The process of making these paintings was just as aggressive as the imagery. The surface is built up, an image is created. It's then scraped back, reconfigured from the ghost of the previous arrangement of color and shape. You would employ such tactics as adhering newsprint to the surface of the wet painting, and then ripping it away, transferring an impression or trace onto the newsprint, which would then constitute the foundation of a new work. De Kooning had a rich body of figurative work outside of his initial exploration into the subject matter. This drawing, a study for the painting Pink Angels, is an example of de Kooning's abstract experimentation being in service to what will ultimately be a representation of a human figure. What started out as pure abstraction becomes representational. There is a dialogue between representational symbolism and the unintelligibility of de Kooning's abstract language. The interpretations concerning violence and hatred of women must have come as quite a surprise to de Kooning. He sincerely felt he was making humorous images. Cacophonous color combinations, the comically exaggerated sexual organs, and generally distorted forms contrast in their neurosis against the well-adjusted Cartesian ideal. He creates images that are hilarious in their schizophrenia, profoundly humorous in the context of their relationship with classicism. Just look at this thing. I don't think it's too hard to imagine Willem de Kooning standing behind a desk and laughing maniacally to himself as he created this image. Every feature of the women paintings is a product of the tireless reworking of a surface, a product of spontaneity that is discarded but ultimately serves to inform the future reworkings, their trace left behind on the canvas, which ultimately serve as a foundation for the next stage of the painting. The economy of the brushstrokes and the intensity of the hues, combined with feverish mark-making, give their work their illusion of hurriedness. Violent, terrifying, or humorous, regardless of your interpretation, de Kooning's approach to painting is as revolutionary as it is ingenious. Process takes over, and consequently the final product depends almost entirely on the spontaneous act of the destructive de Kooning painting session. And finally, the discussion questions. 1. Do you agree that the imagery in de Kooning's work is violent? Why or why not? And 2. Do you feel like these works are subversively or overtly humorous? Not humorous at all? Why? And so concludes my long-awaited and more than likely underwhelming presentation on the artwork of Willem de Kooning.